The massive alien ship moved through space like a silver needle threading through dark fabric. The Kethvari Ascendant was the pride of the Kethvari fleet. Built with the finest quantum processors and powered by antimatter cores that could light up entire star systems, the ship represented the peak of galactic technology. Dr. Valtor Quinn stood before the main display screen in the research laboratory. His purple skin gleamed under the soft blue lights of the ship. The numbers on the screen made his 4 eyes narrow with concern. Every calculation pointed to the same terrible conclusion. Navigation Officer Zixon approached from behind, carrying a data pad in his 6-fingered hands. "Captain, the statistics are confirmed. We have analyzed every ship that entered the graveyard drift in the past 3 cycles. The survival rate remains at 0.00001%. Dr. Quinn turned to face his crew. The graveyard drift stretched before them through the main viewing portal. It looked harmless enough, just empty space dotted with distant stars. But hidden within that seemingly peaceful region lay something that turned advanced technology into scrap metal. Engineer Mordick spoke up from his station near the quantum computer. "Thanks, Doctor. We have run every simulation possible. Our computers predict total system failure within 6 hours of entering the drift zone. The failure patterns make no logical sense." Communications Specialist Fenra added her own concerns. "Sir, we have studied the few surviving crew reports. The survivors speak of technology that simply stops working. Advanced systems fail in ways that should be impossible. Quantum processors crash with errors that violate basic physics." Dr. Quinn walked to the center of the laboratory, where a 3-dimensional map of the graveyard drift rotated slowly in the air. Red dots marked the locations where ships had been lost. Over 800 vessels in 3 years, each one more advanced than anything that primitive worlds could build. The Kethvari had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Their technology was so advanced that younger species viewed them almost as gods. Quantum computers that could calculate the movement of every atom in a star system, antimatter engines that could cross the galaxy in days, force fields that could stop supernovas. Yet something in the graveyard drift made all of that useless. "Look at this data." Dr. Quinn pointed to the holographic display. Every ship that entered the drift experienced the same pattern. First, the quantum computers would begin producing impossible results. Then the antimatter containment systems would start fluctuating. The force field generators would create fields that bent inward instead of outward. Zixon studied the data. "Captain, the pattern suggests that advanced technology itself becomes unstable in the drift. It is as if the laws of physics change in ways that make complex systems impossible to maintain." Mordick added his technical analysis. "The quantum processors seem to experience something we call cascade decoherence. Instead of maintaining quantum states, they collapse into chaos. Every quantum bit becomes random. The more advanced the system, the faster it fails." Dr. Quinn had spent his entire career studying impossible phenomena. He had investigated black holes that sang in mathematical harmonies. He had analyzed stars that burned with cold fire. He had even discovered planets where time moved backwards. But the graveyard drift defied every theory, every law, every principle of science. He knew. The ship shuddered slightly as they approached the edge of the drift. Fenra looked up from her communications console. "Sir, I am detecting some kind of interference with our long-range sensors. The patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Dr. Quinn made his decision. "We proceed as planned. This is why we are here. To solve the greatest mystery in the galaxy. If we turn back now, we learn nothing. Activate all recording systems. I want every sensor reading, every computer calculation, every system status logged." The crew moved to their stations with the precision that came from years of working together. The Kethvari were methodical by nature. They approached problems with mathematical certainty and technological superiority. They had never encountered a problem they could not solve given enough time and computing power. As the ship crossed into the graveyard drift, the first signs of trouble appeared. Immediately, the quantum navigation computer began producing coordinates that placed them simultaneously into 17 different locations. The antimatter engine efficiency readings jumped between impossible values, the artificial gravity generators, created localized fields that pulled in random directions. Mord stared at his engineering displays in disbelief. Captain, the quantum processors are reporting errors that should not exist. They claim to be calculating negative square roots of positive numbers. The antimatter containment is reading temperatures below absolute zero. The whole system is becoming mathematically impossible. Quinn watched as his perfect technology began to betray them one by one. The ship systems that had worked flawlessly for decades started producing impossible results. The environmental controls began cycling between vacuum and high pressure. The lights flickered in patterns that spelled out words and languages that did not exist. Finra tried to maintain communication with the outside galaxy, but her equipment was failing. Sir, the communication array is transmitting messages we never sent and receiving replies from coordinates where no ships exist. The quantum entanglement communicators are entangled with particles that appear to be in multiple universes simultaneously. The ship began to drift as the navigation systems failed completely. They were no longer flying through space, so much as tumbling through a region where the basic rules of reality seemed negotiable. Advanced technology that relied on quantum mechanics and mathematical precision could not function in a place where mathematics itself became unreliable. Quinn realized, with growing horror, that they were about to become another red dot on the galactic maps, another example of how the most advanced civilization in the galaxy could be reduced to helpless victims by something they could not understand or control. The last working console showed the statistics one final time. Graveyard drift. Survival rate 0.00001%. As darkness claimed, the ship. Dr. Quinn wondered if anyone would ever solve this mystery, or if the graveyard drift would remain forever as a monument to the limits of even the most advanced technology. The Kethvari Ascendant went silent, joining the countless other vessels that had learned too late that sometimes in the universe advancement and complexity could become the greatest weaknesses of all. Jake Martinez wiped grease from his hands with an old rag and stared at the mining drone spread across his garage floor. The 17-year-old had been working on the ancient machine for 3 weeks, trying to bring it back to life. Parts were scattered everywhere, but Jake could see the potential hidden beneath decades of wear and damage. His sister Lisa poked her head through the garage door. Jake, you have been out here for hours. Mom says dinner is ready, and you still have that xenobiology test tomorrow. Jake did not look up from the drone. 1 more hour. Lisa, I almost have the power coupling figured out. This old girl just needs someone who understands. Lisa rolled her eyes. You spend more time with broken machines than you do studying. Maybe if you focused on real academics instead of playing with junk, you might actually pass your classes after. Lisa left. Jake returned to his work. The mining drone was older than he was built, with simple mechanical systems that most people had forgotten how to repair. But Jake loved machines like this. They were honest, direct. When something was broken, you could see it, touch it, fix it with your hands. The radio in the corner had been playing background music, but suddenly it erupted with static. Jake reached over to adjust the frequency, but instead of clearing up, the signal became stranger. Mathematical patterns emerged from the noise complex, sequences that repeated in ways that seemed almost like language. Jake had built the radio himself from spare parts and old components. Most people would have dismissed the signal as interference, but Jake recognized something others might miss. This was not random noise. This was structured, intentional. Desperate, he grabbed a notebook and started writing down the patterns, numbers, sequences that repeated in mathematical progressions. The signal was weak and fading, but Jake could see the structure underneath. Someone was trying to communicate, and they were using mathematics as a universal language. Jake ran the numbers through his head, calculating distances and trajectories. If this signal was coming from space, then someone was in serious trouble. The location coordinates embedded in the transmission pointed to a region of space that was officially empty. Jake pulled up the galactic charts on his computer. The coordinates led to something called the graveyard drift. a region that ships avoided. There were warnings posted about equipment failures and navigation hazards. The official Earth command position was that no vessels were authorized in that sector, but Jake could hear the desperation in the mathematical patterns. Someone was out there sending a distress call, and no one was listening. His Uncle Pete owned a small cargo hauler called the Betty. The ship was old and basic, but it could make short interstellar jumps. Pete was off-world on a trading run and had left Jake with maintenance duties. The ship was supposed to stay docked, but Jake had always been good at convincing machines to do things they were not supposed to do. Jake spent the next hour loading the Betty with every tool and spare part he could find. His toolbox contained wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers, and other basic implements that most spacers had replaced with automated systems. Jake also grabbed emergency rations, water, and a medical kit. The ship computer protested when Jake tried to input the coordinates. Warning: this destination is marked as hazardous. Navigation to this sector is not recommended. Jake overrode the warnings and began the pre-flight sequence he had been flying with Uncle Pete since he was 12 and knew the Betty better than most people knew their own cars. The ship was old, but reliable, built with mechanical systems that could be repaired with basic tools. Earth Command tried to contact him as he undocked unauthorized vessel. This is Luna Control. You do not have clearance for departure. Return to dock immediately. Jake switched off the radio and engaged the hyperspace drive. The Betty was not fast or elegant, but she was dependable. The kind of ship that would keep flying as long as someone was willing to fix her when she broke. The ship jumped to hyperspace. Jake reviewed what he knew. Someone was in trouble. In a region of space where advanced technology failed, the signal had been mathematical, structured, intelligent. But whoever was sending it was using methods that suggested their normal communication systems were down. Jake had always believed that if something was broken, it could be fixed. You just needed the right tools, the right approach, and enough stubborn determination to keep trying until you found a solution. Most people gave up too easily. They relied on computers and automated systems to solve their problems. But Jake had grown up fixing things with his hands. He understood that sometimes the simplest solution was the best solution. Sometimes a hammer worked better than a quantum processor. Sometimes getting your hands dirty was more effective than running complex calculations. The Betty dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the graveyard drift, and immediately, Jake could see why ships avoided this region. Space itself seemed wrong here. The stars flickered in patterns that hurt to look at. His navigation computer began producing readings that made no sense. The ship system started acting strangely. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making Jake feel momentarily weightless. The lights dimmed and brightened randomly. The life support system began cycling through different atmospheric compositions. But Jake did not panic. He had spent his life working with machines that misbehaved. His approach to problems was practical and direct. When something went wrong, you diagnosed the problem, found the cause, and fixed it. Jake could see a large ship drifting in the distance, dark and silent. It was clearly alien technology, far more advanced than anything humans had built, but it was also clearly in trouble. Jake maneuvered the Betty closer to the alien vessel. His own ship was struggling with the strange effects of the drift, but the simple mechanical systems were holding better than complex electronics. The Betty was too basic to fail in sophisticated ways. As Jake prepared to dock with the alien ship, he wondered what he would find inside. Advanced aliens with technology beyond human understanding, or just people in trouble who needed someone with the right tools and the willingness to use them. Jake grabbed his toolbox and headed for the airlock, ready to prove that sometimes the best solutions came not from the most advanced technology, but from the most basic human instinct to help others and fix what was broken. Jake sealed his makeshift airlock connection between the Betty and the alien ship. The docking procedure had been challenging since the two vessels were designed by completely different species, with different ideas about how ships should connect. But Jake had managed to create a seal, using rubber gaskets, duct tape, and determination. The alien ship was enormous compared to the Betty. Jake could have fit his entire cargo hauler in just the main corridor. The walls were made of some kind of smooth metal that seemed to shift color as he moved. The lighting was dim and flickering, suggesting that power systems were failing. Jake carried his toolbox down the corridor, listening to the sounds the ship made. Every machine had its own voice when it was healthy, and a different voice when it was sick. This alien ship was definitely sick. Jake could hear the irregular hum of failing power systems, the stuttering rhythm of malfunctioning life support, and the occasional electronic whine of computers struggling to function. He found the crew in what appeared to be the main laboratory. Most of them were in some kind of emergency stasis pods, but one alien was still conscious. Dr. Velter Quinn was tall and purple, with 4 eyes and skin that seemed to shimmer in the failing light. The alien looked at Jake with obvious surprise and confusion. He spoke in a melodic language that Jake did not understand, but then switched to accented English. Human child, what are you doing here? This region is extremely dangerous. You should not have come. Jake set down his toolbox and looked around the laboratory. The technology was incredible. Holographic displays showed complex mathematical equations. Quantum computers lined the walls, humming with power that flickered on and off. Sophisticated sensors and instruments filled every surface, but Jake could see that most of it was broken or failing. The holographic displays showed error messages in alien script. The quantum computers were producing random outputs instead of calculations. The sophisticated instruments were giving readings that changed randomly. Dark Quinn struggled to explain their situation. Human, this place does things to advanced technology that should not be possible. Our quantum computers are calculating impossible results. Our antimatter engines are producing contradictory readings. Our systems are failing in ways that violate the basic laws of physics. Jake listened politely while examining the alien equipment. He had never seen anything so advanced, but he could recognize the symptoms of system failure. The alien technology was incredibly sophisticated, but it was also incredibly fragile. When something went wrong, it failed catastrophically. You have any basic tools? Jake asked. Tools that do not use computers or quantum processors, just simple mechanical devices. Dar Quinn looked confused. We have maintenance robots that can perform any necessary repairs. They are controlled by quantum processors and guided by artificial intelligence systems, but currently none of them are functional. Jake nodded and opened his toolbox. The alien stared in amazement at the collection of simple mechanical tools: wrenches, screwdrivers, hammers, wire cutters. Nothing computerized, nothing automated, just basic implements that humans had been using to fix things for thousands of years. What are those devices? Dr. Quinn asked. Tools, Jake replied. These are for fixing things when they break. He picked up a wrench. This one is for turning nuts and bolts. This one, he held up a screwdriver, is for turning screws. And this one, he hefted a hammer, is for convincing stubborn parts to work properly. The alien looked horrified. Those are so primitive. How can they accomplish anything useful? Jake grinned and approached one of the failing quantum computer banks. The display was flashing error messages and producing random symbols instead of meaningful data. Jake studied the setup for a few minutes, tracing power cables and examining connection points. He found a loose connection where vibration had worked a quantum coupling partially free. The sophisticated diagnostic systems were trying to compensate for the loose connection by rerouting power through increasingly complex pathways, but that was just making the problem worse. Jake simply tightened the coupling with his wrench. The quantum computer immediately began functioning normally. De Quinn stared in disbelief. You repaired our quantum processor with that? Primitive tools. Sometimes, Jake explained, the simplest solution is the best solution. Your computer was not broken, it just had a loose connection. All the fancy diagnostics and automated systems were trying to solve a complex problem when the real problem was very simple. Jake moved through the ship systematically examining the failing systems. Most of the problems were actually quite basic. Power connections had worked loose during the ship vibrations. Cooling systems were blocked by debris that automated cleaners could not remove. Control circuits had developed simple shorts that sophisticated diagnostic systems could not identify. Jake fixed each problem with basic tools and practical solutions. He used wire to bypass damaged circuits. He cleaned cooling vents with a brush. He tightened loose connections with wrenches. He even used duct tape to seal a small leak in a coolant line. Dr. Quinn followed Jake around the ship, watching in amazement as systems came back online. Human, how? Do you know what to do? You have no training with our technology? You cannot even read our control displays. Jake paused in his work to explain. I do not need to understand your technology. I just need to understand how things break. Most problems are simple, even in complex systems. Loose connections, blocked vents, damaged wires, overheated components. The symptoms are always the same, regardless of how advanced the technology is. The alien was beginning to understand, but still struggled with the concept. But our diagnostic systems are automated. Repair protocols, our quantum analyzers, should be able to identify and fix these problems. Jake nodded. Your systems are very advanced, but they are also very complicated. When something goes wrong, they try to solve the problem by becoming even more complicated. They look for complex solutions to what might be simple problems. Dr. Quinn watched Jake repair another system by simply cleaning corrosion from a contact point. Human, I am beginning to understand something about your species. You approach problems differently than we do. We seek to understand everything before we act. You simply act and understand through action. Jake smiled and continued working. That is one way to put it. When something is broken, the most important thing is to fix it. Understanding can come later. As more systems came online throughout the ship, the other aliens began awakening from emergency stasis. They gathered around Jake, watching this primitive human repair their advanced technology with simple tools and basic knowledge. The ship was functioning again, but Jake knew the repairs were temporary. The graveyard drift was still affecting the advanced systems, and they would need to leave soon before everything failed again. But for now, Jake had proven something important. Sometimes the most advanced technology in the galaxy could be fixed by a teenager with a toolbox and the simple belief that broken things could be made to work again. Jake stood in the main engineering section of the alien ship, surrounded by technology that should have been impossible to understand. The Kethvari crew watched nervously as he examined their most critical systems with tools that looked like museum pieces compared to their quantum processors and antimatter cores. Dr. Quinn translated the technical displays for Jake. Human, the quantum navigation array is experiencing cascade failures every few minutes. The antimatter containment is fluctuating outside safe parameters. The artificial gravity generators are creating localized distortions that violate several laws of physics. Jake nodded and opened his toolbox wider. He had brought spare parts from the Betty, along with basic electronic components that he used for repairs: wire, resistors, capacitors, mechanical relays, switches, the kind of simple parts that most advanced civilizations had stopped using centuries ago. Engineer Mordick pointed to the quantum navigation computer. The system uses 17 different quantum processors working in parallel harmony. Each processor calculates potential navigation paths by analyzing quantum probability matrices. The complexity is beyond anything your species has developed. Jake studied the setup. The quantum computer was beautiful in its complexity. Crystalline processors hummed with energy, while holographic displays showed calculations that moved faster than human eyes could follow. But every few minutes, the entire system would crash, producing error messages and impossible results. The problem, Jake realized, was that the system was too smart. It was trying to calculate navigation through space, where the normal rules of physics were unreliable. When the quantum processors encountered paradoxical data, they crashed because they could not compute impossible results. Need to build you a backup system, Jake announced. One that does not rely on quantum calculations, something simple that can work even when the physics gets weird. The aliens looked horrified as Jake began dismantling sections of their quantum computer, but instead of destroying it, he was installing parallel systems, simple mechanical switches that could route power manually, basic analog computers that calculated trajectories using electrical circuits instead of quantum matrices navigation. Officer Zixon, protested Human. You are replacing our precision quantum guidance system with primitive analog circuits. Those systems cannot possibly provide the accuracy needed for interstellar navigation. Jake connected a mechanical gyroscope to his analog computer. They do not need to be as accurate as your quantum system. They just need to work when your quantum system fails, which in this place seems to be every few minutes. Dr. Quinn watched as Jake installed manual overrides throughout the ship's systems. Jake was not destroying their technology, he was giving them alternatives, simple, robust systems that could function when the advanced systems could not. The artificial gravity system was next. Jake traced the power flow from the antimatter reactor through quantum field generators to gravity manipulation arrays. The system was designed to create perfectly controlled gravitational fields, but in the graveyard drift it was creating random gravity wells and weightless zones. Jake installed manual controls that bypassed the quantum field generators. Instead of trying to manipulate gravity itself, his system simply redirected the ship momentum using mechanical thrusters. It was crude, compared to the elegant gravity manipulation, but it was reliable. Communications specialist Fenra watched Jake work on her equipment. Human, our quantum entanglement communicator, can transmit messages instantly across any distance, but here it receives replies from parallel universes and sends our messages to coordinates that do not exist. Jake studied the communication system and shook his head. That system is too complex for this environment, but we can build something simpler. He began installing a basic radio transmitter, using spare parts from his toolbox. It will not work across galactic distances, but it will let us talk to my ship has. Jake worked. He explained his philosophy to the fascinated aliens. Your technology tries to do everything perfectly. My technology just tries to do what it needs to do. When your quantum computer crashes, my analog computer keeps calculating. When your gravity manipulator creates impossible fields, my thrusters still push the ship. Ford Mordick began to understand. Human, you are not replacing our systems, you are creating redundancy. When our advanced technology fails, your primitive technology continues to function. Jake grinned. Exactly. Your computers are smarter than mine, but mine are too stupid to realize that something is impossible, so they keep working even when the universe stops making sense. The aliens watched in amazement as Jake continued his modifications. He installed mechanical backup controls for every critical system, manual steering in case the navigation computer failed, hand-operated switches for life support systems, analog displays that showed basic information even when the main computers crashed. Dr. Quinn realized what Jake was doing. The human was not trying to understand their technology, he was working around it. Jake assumed that the advanced systems would fail and planned for that failure. His solutions were simple, robust, and designed to work under impossible conditions, but the real test came when they tried to move the ship. The quantum engines immediately began producing contradictory thrust readings. The navigation computer crashed within minutes. The artificial gravity created a localized tornado in the main corridor. Jake calmly switched to his backup systems. The mechanical thrusters engaged, pushing the ship forward at a steady pace. The analog navigation computer began plotting a course using simple physics calculations. The manual gravity controls restored normal conditions throughout the ship. The aliens stared at their displays, showing two sets of completely different readings. The quantum systems reported that the ship was simultaneously moving in 17 different directions at impossible speeds. The analog systems showed steady forward progress toward the edge of the graveyard. Driftsixon looked at the conflicting data. Human, which readings are correct? The quantum systems, or the analog systems? Jake checked his simple instruments and looked out the viewing portal. Both readings are correct from their own perspective. Your quantum computer is seeing all the possible quantum states. Simultaneously, my analog computer is just measuring where we actually are. The difference is that mine does not care about the impossible possibilities, it just tracks reality. Darkwing began to understand something profound about human problem solving. Humans did not try to understand everything before acting. They found solutions that worked. Even if they did not understand why they worked, they accepted that reality was sometimes more important than theories. The ship continued moving toward the edge of the drift. Jake made final adjustments to his jury-rigged systems. The repairs were holding, but barely everything depended on reaching normal space before the makeshift solutions failed completely. Jake looked at his crude but functional modifications and smiled. Sometimes the best engineering was not about building the most advanced system possible. It was about building a system that worked, no matter what the universe threw at it. The Kethvari were learning that there was wisdom and simplicity and strength in accepting that some problems required practical solutions rather than theoretical perfection. The edge of the graveyard drift loomed ahead like a border between chaos and sanity. Jake could see normal space beyond, where stars held steady positions and the laws of physics worked the way they were supposed to, but getting there would require the most desperate plan he had ever attempted. Quinn studied the sensor readings with growing concern. Our ship is too damaged to make the transition alone. The quantum engines are failing faster than your analog systems can compensate. The structural integrity is compromised from the gravitational distortions. We need more power and stability than we currently possess. Jake looked at the massive alien ship, then back at his tiny cargo hauler. The Betty, the size difference was ridiculous. The Kethvari Ascendant was over a kilometer long and massed millions of tons. The Betty was barely 50 meters long and could fit in one of the alien ship cargo bays. What if we link the ships together? Jake suggested. My ship provides navigation and control while yours provides the main power. We fly them as one combined vessel until we reach normal. Space engineer Mordick ran quick calculations on his functioning systems. The mass ratios are completely wrong. Your ship has insufficient power to guide our vessel. The structural stress would tear both ships apart. The probability of success is effectively zero. Jake scratched his head. Yeah, but has anyone actually tried it? The aliens exchanged glances that clearly meant they thought the human had lost his mind. Dr. Quinn attempted to explain patiently. The physics involved are extremely complex. The power coupling would require precise quantum field alignment. The navigation coordination would need quantum entangled processors working in perfect synchronization. Jake was already heading toward the docking bay. I will get my ship positioned. We can use mechanical couplers and power cables. Nothing fancy. Just basic connections that cannot fail in complicated ways. Navigation. Officer Zixon protested. But how will you coordinate the navigation between two completely different ship systems without quantum entanglement? Communicators. Jake held up a simple radio. Easy, we talk to each other. You tell me which direction to go. I steer both ships. I have been flying the Betty since I was 12, and she responds to me like an extension of my own hands. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as Jake began the most insane docking procedure any of them had ever witnessed. Instead of using sophisticated computer-controlled positioning systems, Jake flew the Betty manually, using nothing but visual references and instinct. He maneuvered his tiny ship beneath the massive alien vessel and began attaching mechanical coupling points, heavy-duty clamps that locked the two ships together physically. Power cables thick as tree trunks that would carry energy between the vessel's basic radio antennas for communication. Quinn monitored the procedure from the alien ship bridge. The structural stress readings are approaching critical levels. The power flow between our ships is creating feedback loops that our computers cannot analyze. Your ship should not be able to maintain position under our engine thrust. Jake's voice crackled over the simple radio. The Betty is tougher than she looks, and I know exactly how much stress she can handle. We just need to baby her through the acceleration and keep the power flow steady. The moment of truth arrived. As they prepared to leave the graveyard drift, Jake sat in the Betty pilot seat with manual controls for both ships. The alien ship engines provided the power, while Jake steered using mechanical linkages and basic thruster controls. The quantum systems on the alien ship immediately began failing as they attempted the escape. The navigation computer crashed with impossible error messages. The antimatter engines produced contradictory thrust readings, the artificial gravity created localized storms throughout the ship, but Jake backup systems held steady. The mechanical couplers transmitted control inputs between the ships. The analog navigation computer plotted a steady course. The manual engine controls maintained thrust, despite the quantum system failures. Dr. Quinn watched his instruments in amazement, as two completely different sets of readings told entirely different stories. The quantum sensors reported that they were moving backward through time, while simultaneously existing in parallel universes. The analog instruments showed steady progress toward normal space communications specialist. Fenra tried to maintain contact with Jake over the radio. Human, our quantum systems report that your ship no longer exists, while also claiming that it exists in 17 different locations. How are you maintaining control? Jake's voice came back steady and calm. I am not paying attention to what your computers think is happening. I am watching where we actually are and steering toward where we actually want to go. Sometimes reality is simpler than the math that describes it. The escape took 3 hours of the most improbable flying in galactic history. Jake manually steered both ships through space, where the laws of physics changed randomly. The Betty groaned and creaked under stresses that should have torn her apart. The alien ship systems failed and recovered in impossible patterns, but Jake kept flying with the stubborn determination that had driven him to fix broken machines. Since childhood, when the navigation computer crashed, he steered by the stars. When the engine controls failed, he switched to backup thrusters. When the power coupling overloaded, he rerouted it through spare cables. Finally, they crossed the boundary into normal space. The quantum systems on the alien ship immediately stabilized. The impossible error messages disappeared. The contradictory readings resolved into sensible data. The universe started following its own rules again. Dr. Quinn stared at his instruments in disbelief. According to our calculations, what we just accomplished was statistically impossible. The probability of success was so low that our computers classified it as a mathematical impossibility. Jake docked the Betty properly and came aboard the alien ship, carrying his toolbox. He looked tired but satisfied. Well, it might have been impossible, but it worked. Sometimes that is all that matters. The aliens gathered around Jake, trying to understand how he had accomplished something that their most advanced calculations said could not happen. Dr. Quinn spoke for all of them. Human, how did you know that your plan would succeed? Jake shrugged. I did not know it would work. I just knew it was worth trying most. People give up when the math says something is impossible, but math is just a way of describing reality. It is not reality itself. Reality is what actually happens when you try something. Engineer Mordick looked at the combination of alien technology and human jury-rigging that had saved them all. Human, your solutions violate several principles of advanced engineering. Your methods should not work according to our understanding of optimal system design. Jake packed his tools back into his toolbox. Maybe your optimal systems are too complicated for messy situations like this. Sometimes the best solution is not the most advanced solution. Sometimes it is just the solution that works when everything else fails. As Jake prepared to return home, Dr. Quinn asked, one final question, human. What will you tell your people about what happened? Here Jake thought for a moment. I will tell them that when something is broken, you fix it. When someone needs help, you help them. And when everyone says something is impossible, you try it anyway, because sometimes they are wrong. The final statistics were entered into the galactic database. Graveyard drift survival rate, 0.00002%, thanks to one human teenager with a wrench and an absolute refusal to accept that something could not be fixed. Jake Martinez returned to his garage on Luna, Colony Station 7, where he continued fixing broken machines and proving that the most powerful force in the universe was not advanced technology, but human stubbornness combined with a basic toolbox and the simple belief that everything could be repaired if you just tried hard enough.